Positive Lens Podcasts. I'm your host, Scott T. Each week, we will bring you positive law enforcement news stories from across the globe, shared by departments and citizens like yourself. In our Getting to Know Your Local Leo segment, we will speak with a member of the law enforcement community about everyday life and most things non-law enforcement, as we hope to adjust your focus so you see that members of your local law enforcement community are not much different than you and me.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 29. In this Getting to Know Your Local Leo episode, you will meet Chief Tracy Basterrechea, the Chief of Police at the Meridian Police Department in Meridian, Idaho. In part 1 of this 2-part episode, we talk about everyday life and lessons learned as he shares with us his ancestral history of being a first-generation Basque, including being a descendant of a Basque Strongman, plus how growing up in a small town of people who cared about other people's successes, combined with a strong family work ethic, had a profound influence on him. However, before his journey into policing, he had other aspirations and state championships to win. Check out what sports he won his state championships in, what he believes is your best tool, and how he prioritizes time for his son's events. Please welcome to the podcast the Chief of Police from the Meridian Police Department in Meridian, Idaho, Chief Tracy Basterrechea.
Hey, thanks for having me this morning.
It's an honor, sir. I appreciate you joining us today. How are you?
Very good. Yep. Start to a good week. So
awesome to hear. Now, many individuals are not geographically experts throughout the country. So can you tell us a little bit about Meridian Police Department itself? I understand, obviously, it's in Idaho, and I think Ada County is also one of the safest counties in the state itself. But can you tell us a little bit about the city and the county?
Yeah, you bet. We're in southwestern Idaho. We're right next to the capital, which is Boise. We're a city of about 150,000 people. We have 152 sworn officers, just over 200 total staff at the police department. Our city is actually one of the safest in Idaho. Idaho overall has very low crime rates. Ada County has very low crime rates, but even compared to smaller cities throughout the state, we're one of the probably top 5 when it comes to safety. So we're very, very proud of that. Pretty busy city. We have the 2 of the busiest intersections in the state of Idaho that run right through the middle of our city. Lucky us. We've really become kind of a destination. We have, we just opened the second largest shills in the country in Meridian about a year ago. So we have a lot of people that their destination is to come to Meridian and, come spend their weekends, come spend their evenings out at a lot of our establishments. So fairly busy area.
Outstanding. And that's a pretty good ratio. You figure 150,000, 152 sworn officers.
Yeah, we're currently hiring, so trying to keep up with that. We're down about, I think, 13 bodies right now. Have some retirements coming up, so we're really trying to keep up with that hiring and that retention piece that every agency struggles with. We just started an academy, and then we'll start another academy in October of this coming year.
Okay, so that's definitely good. Yeah, I definitely want to get into some of that with you today because I know you've done a lot of work with the culture changes there and shifting it to a different viewpoint and perspective from the current officers and also how they, the residents of the city see you. So yes, I definitely want to make sure we touch on that today for you. Now, going back to the beginning, so tell us a little about yourself. Where you born? Where you grew up? Originally from?
Yeah, so I was born in a little small ranching and farming community about 2 hours south of here, Gooding, Idaho. Very small area. We're first generation Basque here. My father came here in 1952 on a sheep herding contract and stayed. My grandfather had actually been here in 1919 on a sheep herding contract and then went back to the Basque region in northern Spain and married my grandmother. They had a farm. He worked in a sawmill. He was a Basque Strongman, rock lifter.
Wow.
And the Spanish Civil War broke out, and after Franco came into power, just wasn't a very good place to live, especially if you were Basque. And
Okay.
so he came back. He actually gave his picture to another sheep herder who was coming back to the United States, and asked him if he would give it to his old boss and see if they'd bring him back. And they remembered my grandpa. They called him George. His name was Gregorio. And the guy saw it, said, yeah, we loved him. He was a great worker. We'll bring him back. Well, then with him, he brought my father, and then they sent back and brought the other 3 sons to the United States eventually. But my grandfather ultimately went back to the Basque Country to live with my grandmother, and he and my dad stayed. One of my favorite stories is my dad talking about sitting in sheep camp with my grandfather, and it's during the height of the Cold War, and my grandfather was telling him, you live in the greatest country in the world. If you work hard, you can be as successful as you want to be. And my dad, being a 17-year-old kid, and not much education, said, but what about the Soviet Union? They're the other superpower. And my grandfather told him that form of government will never work. It'll collapse because you can't just keep your thumb on people and take from them. And I just thought that was a really, really poignant for somebody who really no education and just life experience. And so we were very, all in when it, very proud to be Americans. That was one of the things my dad always told us is, you're not Basque American, you're American of Basque descent. And was very proud to be here. And so that's something, me, I have 2 brothers that, we were very proud of. My mom and my dad were super hard working people and made sure that they put all 3 of their boys through college, or as my mom would call us, her boys.
Her boys.
But they were just hardworking people. They neither one of them came from much. My mom was born in Arkansas, raised partially in Nebraska, and they traveled across the United States, coming to Idaho, working at different farms, trying to make their way to Idaho. And they were really hardworking people, very generous people when it came to those people around them. I mean, they just treated everybody very well. And I think they were a phenomenal example for my brothers and myself. I mean, for my parents, it didn't matter race, creed, rich, poor, it didn't matter. One of my favorite stories is when my mother passed away, at her funeral, I remember the priest said, if you've ever had Doris's cooking, please stand up. And like the entire church stood up.
That is outstanding.
And that was one of my favorite memories, was we just had people at our house all the time, having dinners at our house. And so that, I think, really set an example for us.
Absolutely. I think, and when you see that, like I said, everyone in the church stands up, it opens your eyes to the appreciation and impact that your mom specifically had on the community. Yeah. And as a kid, you don't always realize that, right? You see it, but it doesn't sink in until, unfortunately, at those moments when you turn around and there's a sea of people behind you that are only there for your mom.
Yeah, one of the neat things, there was a Basque guy, really good friends of our family, and he would never go to anyone's funerals. And I'd ask him, Leo, are you going to go to... And he's like, I'm not going to their funeral. They won't come to mine. And he showed up at my mom's funeral.
Really?
And I was like, that was pretty cool. So, yeah, they were just a great example for us, for sure. And really, I think, molded all of us and where we were going to go on in life and what we were going to do. And but grew up in a great town. I mean, I tell people one of the neat things about Gooding is people celebrate your successes.
That's yeah.
They when you go and you see people, they're more excited about the things you're doing than probably you are. And that's always a really a neat feeling to go back there, that they want people to be successful and go on and do great things. And so I think that's something unique maybe about small town America as well.
And the thing is, when you celebrate the people's successes around you, you bring everybody up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And too often people are concentrating on seeing the demise of the person that's next to them, even if it's a competitor, rather than seeing them
Yep.
do well and both do well, just one wins. They'd rather see one have the negative consequences, and it's like that really doesn't create an inspiring environment.
One of the worst traits in a leader, I think, really is that they can't celebrate other people's successes. They feel like it's a threat to them, and you'll see them cut that person as they're being successful, cut them down a little bit, as if it's going to elevate them more. I think that's just a horrible trait in some leaders. One of the worst traits, really.
Yeah, and it's spread throughout a lot of places too, though. You mentioned your grandfather made the comment about the Soviet Union. It almost even feels like that type of role,
Yes.
right? I mean, you look at all the areas throughout history that have been challenged. Part of it comes to the fact of how they treated the people.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
If you knock people down, a couple things are going to happen. It's going to really become a very bad situation for you because everyone's downtrodden, or if the people are going to rise up in a unified voice, they come forward marching for you, right?
Yes.
It's never a good outcome either way. Now, you mentioned the Basque first generation. I think you have the largest festival in the country as well in Idaho.
We actually one of the largest in the world. It comes every 5 years. Thanks to COVID, we haven't had it since 2015. But yeah, it'll be the end of July, the last week of July, and the first part of August. We'll have Basque people from all over the world. We bring athletes from the Basque country.
Okay.
I usually work with those athletes, and we line them out for the things that they do. The rock lifters, the wood choppers, they do rural sports, a lot of different things. But it's a huge event. It's amazing. Like I said, we'll have Basque people from all over the world, from South America, from New Zealand, from Australia. It's a huge, huge thing. We do starting on Thursday night is the first night. We do a sports night at Quest Arena here, which is the hockey arena. It's already sold out. So that, and then the whole week just has different cultural events, different sporting exhibitions, and just a lot of wine drinking. And it's a blast just to be around all those people from different parts of the world. Yet y'all come together for that event, and it's a huge event here in Idaho for people that aren't Basque. They love to come to the festivals and just see what's going on, and so we're really excited about that.
That is awesome. And I think the cool part is that people who are not Basque getting to experience it and getting to see the culture, getting to understand the people. And then when people go back to wherever they're from, you still have your core contingent of Basque Coast who still live in Idaho, but now they actually have a better understanding of those same individuals.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great event. We, always laugh. Our big summer trip, which was usually was to the Basque Festival in Elko, Nevada. Everyone else was going to Disneyland and everywhere, and the one time my dad would take off was we were going to go to the Basque Festival there, and he was also a rock lifter as well. So, we enjoyed going to those festivals and doing those things.
Well, he said, your parents provided a great foundation for you, and he said you mentioned, the hardworking, caring about people. Those are key attributes that probably led to where you are today. But in between those two parts, you mentioned, athletes, mentioned the rock lifting. What about you, the child growing up? Were you involved in any activities like that nature within the Basque community, or were you involved in sports or singing, dancing?
I was played football. Was big into football. We won a couple state championships at our high school. Huge into wrestling. Started wrestling when I was in the 5th grade on. Wrestled a little bit in college before I realized that drinking some beer with my friends and eating was better than cutting weight and doing those things. But loved wrestling. In the Basque stuff, my son and I both carry, they're called chingas. They're weights. They're 104 pounds in each hand to see who can carry them the furthest.
Oh, wow.
So I still beat him last year, just for the record.
So how far do you carry 104-pound weights in each arm?
I can usually get around 600 to 700 feet. But there are some of we'll bring people from the Basque Country. They'll carry thousands of feet.
Wow,
That's
that
what
is
they do. It's pretty, and they're not big guys. They're probably about my size, 170 to 180 pound guys that are the kind of the biggest weight carriers. Pretty impressive.
Is it about technique and stamina? Just knowing how to have the cadence of the
And-
walk
and
so you
grip.
balance?
Grip strength is a big part of that. But everyone has a little bit different technique. The one thing you'll notice about them is they don't go fast; they go just nice and slow. And you'll have
Slow and
people that
steady
don't
wins
know
the
how to do
race.
it. They want to try to go fast, and then the weights start bouncing around in their hands, and so yeah, there's definitely some technique to it for sure.
So you mentioned the wrestling though, and I believe also you is it jiu-jitsu you do as well?
Yeah, so I have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I also have a black belt in Kodokan Judo as well.
So you figure those two and wrestling make you a pretty formidable opponent when you've had to have some scuffles, I'm guessing, on the ground in law enforcement.
Yeah, they've helped. There's no doubt about it. And I tell everybody, I mean, when we really are arrest and control technique people here at the department, all of them have some type of, most of them, I should say, not every single one, a background in some type of grappling art. I just think that's really important for controlling people, because that's really what the expectation is of the public, is for us to control somebody, to get them into custody, not to beat them into submission.
Right.
Now, no doubt there are times you're going to have to use strikes, and it's warranted, but I think that when you've been involved in the grappling portion of things, you're really comfortable at being in bad positions. You don't panic because you've been in those positions before, and it just gives you a level of confidence where really, I think more important than anything, it helps you avoid some of those confrontations.
And I think that's the important part too, right? Because your first thing is to truly not have the confrontation.
Absolutely. I've said it a million times. Your best tool is your mouth.
Yes.
If you can communicate with people and you can talk them into handcuffs, you've done everything you needed to do and far exceeded the expectations of a lot of people.
And I think communication is it's a hidden. It sounds actually, it's hard to say. It's a hidden secret because we use it every day. But it's like I said, it is truly our most powerful weapon, defense tactic. I mean, negotiating tactic. It all comes from communication, and sometimes it's nonverbal. And you have to be able to read the body languages and what they're doing. But yeah, communication, I think it's one of the things that even children of today, because they're so engaged with technology, their social skills, I don't want to say it's inept, but it's certainly not where it should be because of technology.
Yeah, and we've seen that a little bit with some officers that we've hired, that they just, and their downfall was their inability to communicate with their peers, their inability to communicate with the public, and those types of things. And so it's one of those things, you have to work on if you're not used to it. I have a son who's just turned 21 and wants to go into law enforcement and is currently in college. Very proud of him, by the way. Plays football at Carroll College. Go Fighting Saints in Helena, Montana.
That is awesome. Following your footsteps and playing football.
And so one of the things we've done over the last few summers when he's come home is we just sit and talk, just have conversations. And driving in the car, I'll tell him, get on the internet, find some news story, and we're going to have a discussion about it. And we're going to go back and forth, and I may play devil's advocate, but let's have a discussion so that we can kind of, you can see the different points of view that people have on these things. A big thing that I've tried to drive home to him is you can't live in either this or that world.
Right.
That you've got to be somewhere in between. And the way to find that and to help yourself is to have those conversations with people that disagree with you. And you may walk away from that conversation thinking they don't know what they're talking about, but you've had the conversation and you know where they're coming from. Or you may walk away from it going, oh, that gives me a little different point of view, or it may completely change your view on something. Because I think that's one of the things we miss a lot in our society is other people's perspectives, and a lot of those perspectives are molded from their experiences. And we've
So
got to
true.
remember that, right? On a traffic stop, my perspective of what is occurring on that traffic stop is completely different than the person's perspective that's being stopped.
Right.
And so be curious and ask them questions and those things. And not just from an investigative standpoint, but to get to figure out why people think that the way they do, or why they're viewing you the way they're viewing you. Because their experience where they came from may be completely different with police officers.
Correct. And, and that's what we try to change with this podcast, right? We have the individuals to see that members of the law enforcement, police, and community are very similar and alike what they go through in life. But people are often shaped, like I said, by their experiences. And if their experience as a young child was negative, or they saw someone in their family go through a bad experience, their preconceived notion going forward is always that experience until they experience something different.
Yes. And we have some amazing officers who do that, literally change somebody's perspective because of the way they've treated them on an interaction. And even people that some of our officers have arrested, I've gotten nice letters about them from that experience that they didn't have a very good view of police officers because of previous experiences. But even though this officer took me to jail, here's all the things they did to change my view of how this works. And that's what we want.
And that's a wonderful compliment to you and to the officers, right? Because people are learning from a bad experience possibly still.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I always try to say, people often stop with using their ears to hear, but they're not using their mind to listen. And it's like, you listen with your mind. You don't listen with your ears. Your ears hear everything. And
yeah,
it's like,
I like that.
Same thing with
say
children.
You're hearing me, but you're not listening to me.
You're not listening, right? A quick thing on your son. So you're proud of him. He's 21. He's playing football. He wants to be a police officer. But growing up, what are some of the things as a parent that he did that probably drove you absolutely crazy? You're like, why are you doing these things that you think other parents experience?
Oh, well, I'll tell you, for the most part, and my wife and I talk about this, we've been very lucky with him. Some of the things we were expecting to experience, we really didn't. He was actually a really good kid, ran with a really good group of kids. My wife and I always say he learned from our mistakes, I think, or from watching us be knuckleheads. But, the typical kid things, you and we were all the same way. We want them to be focused in a certain direction, and you need to do these things to be successful. And they're kids, right? They're procrastinating. They're not working quite as hard as you think they should be working, whether it's in school or whether it's in sports or whether it's, I coached him for a little while in wrestling. And I'll never forget my really good friend Rocco. His son was wrestling. And we're both coaching our kids. And Rocco comes to me one day and he goes, I've got an idea. You coach my son, and I'll coach your son, and I think we're both going to be a lot better off.
Yes, and you'll probably get the best out of both of them.
Yeah, and it's really true. You have such high expectations for them. And I think those pay off, though, as well. My dad didn't really attend a lot of our events when we were involved in athletics because he was working. He literally, that man worked 6.5 days a week for 60 years or however many years. I mean, literally 6.5 days a week. He would take half a day off on Sunday. He would work half a day up to noon and then the rest of the afternoon. And that was just the way things were. And so I've been very fortunate and very intentional on trying to make sure I'm attending all my son's events, of trying to help be that coach there for him. I coached him in football. I've coached him in judo, but also, probably unfairly so, holding them to a little bit different expectation.
Right.
And
which will probably serve him better long term than he realizes in the short term.
Hopefully. The conversation that one of them that really sticks out, we used to give the kids Band-Aids to put on their shoulder pads if they did really good because you couldn't put things on their helmets.
Okay.
And they gave out a Band-Aid to some kid, and we're going home, and my son's like, I thought I really deserved a Band-Aid. And I looked at him and I says, you know what I think? I didn't think anyone deserved a Band-Aid after the game you guys played. And he's like, well, I had this great play. I go, well, what about the play where they threw over your head? I go, and I'm like, listen, and I just told him, I go, if you don't worry about those extrinsic things, worry about the intrinsic things. Are you getting better? Are you doing don't compare yourself to this person. What are you doing to make yourself better? Focus on those things, because those are the things really in the long run that are going to make you better. And I've had that discussion with officers. They want special pins and these on their uniform. Oh, I need a pin that says I do this. And I was in the gym one day, and I'd coached this officer's kids in judo. And he says, I know you're not a big fan of those things. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm really not. And he says, well, but what about belts in martial arts? There's these belts. And I says, and you know what? I go, I don't believe in those. I go, they're part of the art. I go, but they're very Western. I go, martial arts used to not have black belts and all these different belts. And I said, and I came up as a wrestler beginning with, doing some boxing, and you never got belts. You just performed. And he didn't get the answer he wanted. He was a little tired. I was like, really, if it was up to me, probably wouldn't be wearing belts. It's why I like no-gi judo and no-gi jiu-jitsu, because you're not wearing any belts. Nobody's making this preconceived notion of your knowledge or your skill or where you're at. You should really be doing it to make yourself better. Measure yourself about where you were last week, not where your partner was last week. And I think that's one of the things really you find, especially when you're looking at some of the martial arts, and I notice in jiu-jitsu, there are people who starting out are very good athletes, and they leave when it gets hard. And it's those people that stick around every single day, right? They're the white belt that keeps showing up.
Right.
And the next thing you know, they're at this level, and the person that originally it came easy to, they dropped off at blue belt.
Yeah, they were getting by athleticism, not by heart.
Yeah, and they moved on. And so I just really think that the more we can look at what is the intrinsic reward that we're getting from the things that we do, that's what we want. That's what we're looking for.
And I think that's also, again, a societal thing that's just shifted too. I have troubles with the idea that everybody gets a trophy. Everybody's the winner. It's like reality of life. There's winning and losing. But like you said, if you're a better version of yourself today, tomorrow, a week from now, overall, that means you're improving. And if you feel it internally, that's more important, because that's your confidence. That makes you go further in everything you do, your relationships, your employment, your life skills, the pin on your shoulder, the Band-Aid, the sticker on the helmet, and they look good, but they don't make you better.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and for me, I really, when we talk to officers and people, I always tell them, at the end of your career, nobody really is going to care about all those cool raids you went on and all your arrests, and they're going to remember you for how you treated them. Mm-hmm. And when you go to retirements, that's what people talk about, how you made them feel, what you did for them. Those are the things people talk about at retirements. They aren't there talking about this raid or that raid. That's for the beers later.
Exactly.
Where the story can get even bigger than it was. Right. But they really care about how you made them feel. What did you do for them? How did you help them be successful?
And if you think about it, we'll go back to your mom. She didn't have pins or, we'll call it, there wasn't a plate hanging on the wall or a pot hanging on the wall for every good meal. Right. But all those people showed up because of how she made them feel and what she did for them.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've now been in law enforcement. Well, I know I use the word law enforcement. I know you favor the word police officer more than law enforcement, so I'll change that part there. But you've been a police officer for over 28 years. What inspired you, though, to go into the role? I mean, it's a very much an active service, what you learned from your parents, but what actually brought policing into it?
Well, whichever direction I was going to go was going to be in some form of service. So as I was growing up, like I told, I loved wrestling, loved that. And so I was kind of at a crossroads of, I was really interested in law enforcement and policing, but I was really interested in teaching and coaching. And so going into college, I wasn't sure which direction I wanted to go in, for sure. And my brother told me, get your degree in education, and that way, if you go into law enforcement and it's just not for you, or when you retire, you can always go back and teach. You can always go back and coach. And so I went into the education route for college, and had done my student teaching at a alternative school when they were just kind of getting new. And I had an experience there that wasn't, I won't say it wasn't great. I mean, the experience, the teaching experience was great, but I had a student coming at grade time that hadn't been doing their work, and they, at that school, you did all your work in the classroom, longer classes, you had no homework. And so I'm going through and I'm giving this student an F, and the teacher I'm working with says, well, let's give them all the makeup work and see if they'll get it done and they can turn it in and they can. I'm like, great. So we give them all the makeup work, brings it back, and they've literally maybe answered every third question on every third page. And I'm like, this is F work. And the teacher says, well, if we give them a D, they'll graduate. And I said, but when he gets in the real world and he shows up to work every third day and he gets fired, he's going to be really confused because this is what we're accepting. And it became a big deal to the point where my advisor from the university actually came down and had to mediate. And I was like, this is crazy. But during the same period, my brother had been a police officer for quite some time, and he was now working at the Boise Police Department, and I was doing ride-alongs with him all the time and loving those ride-alongs. And one night we get called to a vehicle burglar, and we roll up on this burglar in the north end. That dude starts to bolt from one of the cars he's burglarized, and I just bolt out of my brother's car and tackle the guy, right? And just as my brother's sergeant's pulling up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had some choice words.
Yes.
But my brother was like, he jumped before I could tell him not to. So that kind of gave me a little bit of flavor of, hey, this is kind of cool. And just continued to do those ride-alongs with him. And he was a really good example of a police officer, and always had great advice for me. And so opportunity came, and I had applied at Meridian. I was dating my wife at the time, and I would go and fight fires in the summer between college and those things. I think she thought, I'm going to marry a teacher who's going to kind of do this thing. And then I applied at Meridian and became a police officer. We were married in June. I became a police officer in September. So she's been with me. Andy's been with me for, 28 plus years, be 29 in June.
Congratulations.
Really
That's
been
awesome.
A rock for me, and supported me through the good times, supported me through the bad times, has just always been there. And whatever decision I've made career-wise, she's supported wholeheartedly. So,
And that is outstanding because, one of the biggest challenges with individuals who work in policing is keeping that individual, that spouse at home, a center part of their life.
Yeah.
The police work has a big draw on you, and people struggle with giving 100% to one and 100% to the other. And I know it's hard to say how can you give 100% to two, but that's life, that's relationships. But so
and it's not
a testament.
Easy. We've had our ups and our downs, and there was a time period. I mean, I was still a huge officer safety person, and I was training 6 days a week sometimes, whether it was in police training or whether it was judo or jiu-jitsu or whatever I was doing. And that caused some friction at times,
Sure.
And it was just one of those things where that focus, and I had told her, we have a memorial wall here just right around the corner here at the state police campus. And I was like, hey, this is my job, though. This is my goal, is not to have one of our officers on that wall.
Right.
And there also comes a time in your life, though, when you do have to step back a little bit. There's got to be some give. And really, when I kind of started stepping back the most from the training was probably about the time my son was a junior, maybe senior in high school, just because I wanted to dedicate more of that time to our family before he was leaving for college and those things. Now, I made an effort. I probably missed a handful at the most of his events just because it was a priority. I had a former chief from the Nampa Police Department who was a great mentor for me, was a defensive tactics instructor and those things when I came through the academy. And he told me, he said his greatest accomplishment in his career was literally missing just maybe a handful of his kids' events. Go to your kids' event, get back to work, do the things you need to do to try to make yourself as available as you can. Great advice from him for sure.
And that, as parents, I think that's the thing we have to often realize. Our children aren't going to remember that we showed up to work every day. They're going to remember the events we didn't show up to. It's like, we remember our losses more than our wins because they eat at you. For a child, missing events is almost a loss for them. They turn around and they look in the stands or they look in the bleachers and they don't see their parents, but they see the parents of other children. That has to impact them. Because I know when I played sports growing up, I always had family at those events, and you appreciate that. That's your support. So I think that's great advice that you were given, and like I said, you carried it forward with your son. And like I said, those drives in the car, those conversations in the car, or even if it's a 10-minute drive, they're meaningful.
Absolutely. One of our he's now retired detective, Joe Miller, had told me one time. He said, Tracy, your son's going to remember all those times of you playing catch with him, of doing those things. He goes, the trips to Disneyland that we take our kids on, he goes, those aren't the things that really stand out with him. He goes, they'll remember you sitting out there throwing the football with them, you doing judo with them, doing those things. That's what he's going to remember. And so I've been fortunate to have really, really great mentors all the way around, personally, professionally, just people that gave you really good, down-to-earth advice. Not, this is what you have to do to be a chief or for your career. It was, and that good advice has always come around to, what's really important to you, that service and those types of things, and that's focus on those things.
Yeah, and I said, and I'll go back to what you said about your wife too, and having the rock at home, I think is essential. I mean, because all of us need something to go back to. It's, yes, we can go back to religion, we can go back to faith, spirituality, and I'm not dismissing that by no means. But when you walk into your home, and that spouse is there, that bond is there. That really has, especially when you come home from a hard day, or you experience something that you hadn't experienced before, and it wasn't hard, but it just takes a toll on you. And being able to look at that person and see, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And like I said, then it helps not just you, but then your son also, because now that family unit has strength. I think that's really, it's outstanding, and I'm glad, like I said, again, 28 years is phenomenal. Good thing you became the police officer afterwards, right?
Yeah. Well, it was all kind of together, which I think was actually a benefit for us.
But you know what? You're also still in education. I mean, because you're educating your officers, you're educating the public, you're still educating individuals, just not in the structured classroom environment of a school.
And that's what I tell people. There's no doubt, man, that education portion has helped me so much. And in law enforcement, you're always in policing, you're always teaching. Right. You're teaching on calls, you're teaching with somebody sitting in the car next to you. When you're doing classes, obviously you're instructing, but going through the education process, I think, was very helpful for that as well, and with the research and the things that you need to do.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's great, because like I said, there's no interaction that can't be critiqued and probably improved on.
Absolutely.
And it goes back, like you said, even with your son with sports and film study. Yeah, you see the things you did well, but that's expected. You're seeing the flaws that you made, the mistakes you had, the missed block, the missed kick, the missed assignment, and those are the things you're improving on.
Well, he's a long snapper, and his coach said the only people that should know the long snapper's name if he's doing his job right are his parents and his girlfriend. And I was like, that's a good point.
That is a good point. And maybe the kicker, right? Because the kicker and the holder, because they need to make sure they're in alignment. But
no one knows who he is until he screws up. So
yep. But it is to me, it's got to be one of the hardest positions, because you're snapping a ball with two hands, and then someone's trying to fire up and block. Yeah. Someone who's right over the top of you, possibly two people who are trying to rush you on each shoulder, right, to get up the middle. So I think a long snapper is one of the most challenging positions because, center in general I think is challenging.
Yeah.
But a long snapper, you're using two hands on that snap.
Yeah, he
awesome.
He likes it. He loves it.
So when you're not in uniform and you're getting to be yourself on your days off, what do you enjoy doing?
I still love doing jiu-jitsu when I can.
Okay.
It's been a little hectic as chief for a while, so I still try to get in at least once a week. But jiu-jitsu, my wife and I, we like to go hiking and being outdoors. We have great wine country here, so we'll go wine tasting.
Nice.
Visit some of the wineries in the area. Love to travel. We love going back to the Basque country, so that will be on our list coming up. Hopefully, not this year because High Aldi's here, but either next year or the year after when our son graduates from school. So
that would be a nice trip.
We love spending time over there for sure. So
and to reconnect with culture, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's just different there. Just the pace of life's different, and it's just a great place for us to visit. But we like to travel. The fall we spend every weekend traveling to Montana. I mean, we do. Last year we made every single one of the games. So we were fortunate. We played the College of Idaho here last year, but we'll play them there next year. But we try to make all the games. It's just fun. We put up a tailgate at the home games that a lot of the parents come to, and we really just like to be around people. Again, it's kind of like being my mom, I guess. We like to barbecue and those things at the tailgate and have people coming and having a good experience over there at the college. So, those are the things we really like to do. For me, we had talked about it earlier. Every spring I love to go branding cattle and gathering cattle. I have one of my best friends, and we were roommates for a while. We grew up together. Runs a successful cattle operation, and he buys and sells a lot of cattle for different outfits. And so every spring we go out and gather and brand and sort, and I love doing that. My wife thinks I'm crazy. It's taking off work to actually go do hard work.
Do harder work, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit crazy. Got my knee blown out 2 years ago. Got kicked by a steer a couple of years ago.
Oh, man.
But it was worth it. She's like, really? And it was fun. Finished
now,
out
did that
the day.
steer end up on the kitchen table, or did somebody else?
My buddy said, "Trust me, you're going to get the first steak from him." My son was there when it happened, and I knew when it happened. I was like, I've had some knee, and I was like, oh, I think I'm going to need surgery, and crawled up out of that pen, and my son was like, "You got to sit down." I was like, "No, we got to finish. Let's be an example for him." I was like,
"Right,
we got to finish this. Let's."
But isn't that also that's the cattle wrestling way, right? It's like you don't stop. You keep going. That's really what it is. You'll stop when the job is done.
Exactly. So it's fun. It's usually some old friends of ours usually show up, and one really good friend of mine, we go every year and over there, and we have some other friends that come up from our hometown and that area, and it's just a good time to reconnect with people, and there's no political correctness there, and people can be yelled at, they can be cussed at, and no one cries, no one's
worried.
None of that happens. Everybody moves on, and everybody's happy at the end of the day.
To put it in perspective, I know you had, like I said, you were doing the branding a couple weeks in a row. You had to get them together. For the listeners, tell about a little bit how that experience works for those who've never been around it, and the vast number of cattle you actually have been branding in the last few weeks.
If you liked this episode, follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Provide us your feedback in the comments and leave us a rating or review. We truly appreciate your opinion. And then follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook to get all the latest updates. Remember, you can always find places that will share negative law enforcement news stories. But here, at Your Positive Lens, you will only find your positive law enforcement news stories. Once again, I'm your host, Scott T. Thanks for listening, and we'll capture you on the next Your Positive Lens.